Laurence Edmondson is joining me as we look back on all the action that happened at the Portuguese Grand Prix in Portimao. Uncharted territory, but it has been conquered indeed, Laurence, by one man and one man alone. Lewis Hamilton, 92 race wins, the most of any driver of all time, beating Michael Schumacher's record, a man that he definitely looked up to. Now that it's finally sunk in somewhat, Laurence, this is just truly an unbelievable achievement that we keep saying at one point none of us thought was possible, right?
It is a remarkable achievement. I know that we've been living with it for a couple of weeks now after he won at the Nürburgring, and 92 was just going to be a formality, really, given the competitiveness of the Mercedes. But he did it in style as well. You know, he got pole position, sure, but he lost first place. You know, he was running third. He got passed by McLaren. He got passed by Valtteri Bottas, and he worked his way back, and he won by about 25 seconds in the end. So it was really done in style. And also, if you look at the nature of that circuit, the way the tyres were working, the challenges that every single driver out there faced, Lewis arguably dealt with this the best. And kind of talking to some of the people within the team afterwards, they were saying that this was really what makes Lewis so special, is that in a race where it was so much about adapting your style to keep the tyres up to temperature and on a track, like you said, that none of them knew, Lewis was the guy who adapted it, who used his natural feel for it to get the best from the car. And he does this again and again and again. And this is why he's won 92 wins. So I was quite pleased that in breaking this record, he did it in a way where we can demonstrate to everyone why he is so good as well. Because I know it's easy to look at that and people say it's the best car and all this kind of stuff. But Valtteri was also in exactly the same car, got ahead of him at the start, and yet Lewis really kind of embarrassed Valtteri by the end of it with the size of the gap, with the way he got back past him. You know, he made it look easy, and it wasn't. It was all about how Lewis was adapting his style, getting the heat in the tyres, which was so crucial. He talked afterwards about how he was adapting to changing wind conditions, all of this. And on a day when lots of drivers struggled, we had a few little collisions along the way, Lewis kept it clean and won, and yeah, deserves those 92 wins.
And he did it with a cramp in his calf, but that's Lewis Hamilton for you. But you just mentioned the word struggle, Laurence, and let's talk about Alex Albon, because the struggle is seriously real, and it has been real for some time, and it somehow baffles us, and it continues to baffle us. The same car and everything as Max Verstappen, but finishing completely down in 12th now begs to wonder if he can retain his seat for next year, given all the other sharks floating around. I know that you've heard from Christian Horner recently, so what's the deal there? What are you thinking?
Well, Red Bull is still quite keen to defend Alex, but they're having to admit as well that these performances are not up to scratch. It's not what they need or expect from a second driver in the Red Bull team. Now, you look at today's performances, and there's one obvious candidate right there, Pierre Gasly, driving, you know, the carbon fiber off that AlphaTauri and putting it where it was. And he seems like the obvious guy that should fit in. He's got that race win there at Monza early this year. But Red Bull aren't having it. They're saying, you know, that they believe that the AlphaTauri is a much easier car to drive, and therefore, if you put Alex Albon back in that car, you'd see him bounce back up, which is potentially what they're going to do. But equally, if you saw Gasly go the other way, they're not convinced that he would shine in the way that they want him to, and you know, because he didn't have a great year last year. So they're looking outside, but they are saying that they're going to give Alex, you know, till the end of the year. I think Imola really does have to be a turning point for him. And they want to see him turn it around, and they want to keep him there. But it's this ongoing problem. And really what it comes down to is that Red Bull is a very difficult car to drive on the limit. Max Verstappen can live with it. He has all this natural talent in reserve that he can just put into action when he puts the car into a corner and it starts misbehaving. And it seems like Alex just doesn't have the confidence to do the same. So Red Bull still see the talent there, but I think they're having to look elsewhere. And so, as you mentioned, some big names floating around. Sergio Perez clearly waiting on the outcome at Red Bull before he makes a decision on what he does. Williams also seems like an option for him, but he's clearly waiting on what happens at Red Bull. And then, of course, Nico Hülkenberg, who, you know, we've been impressed by when he's been a super sub this year at Racing Point. So the options are there, and that's all more pressure on Alex Albon. And it seems like rather than inspiring a great performance from him, it's just making the situation worse. And it's actually really sad to see, because Alex is a lovely guy and a talented driver, and yet we're seeing him struggle so much.
That's true indeed. I was about to say Nico Hulkenberg, you better mention him because I'm sure he'd pick up that phone so quickly indeed, especially if he had the chance to go to Portimao. But I suppose now that it's all said and done, we have seen racing in Portugal before, but not Portimao. What were your thoughts on the circuit?
I really liked it. I think all the drivers liked it. And that's always a key thing when you go to a circuit like that. It reminded me a little bit of Interlagos in places. Undulating was a word we heard over and over again. Roller coaster was a word we heard over and over again. But it's because it's true. That track has all of those features, and they always make for an exciting track. I think we're all a bit concerned about whether we'd get decent racing there. And perhaps it wasn't the most thrilling race, but at times we saw some overtaking. I think the DRS was a bit too strong, which meant that a number of drivers were able to just cruise past rivals on the pit straight. So I think if we went back there, perhaps they'd tweak that slightly. They could reduce the length of the DRS zone so that it's not quite as powerful an overtaking aid. But it was good, and I'd love to see another race there. And it was an interesting race in many respects as well, with the tyres and how no one really struggled with overheating, which is the problem we always have with the Pirellis. But the cooler temperatures we had there this weekend, the smooth track surface meant that you could push really hard on those tyres. And I think that's why we saw quite a lot of action, certainly in the early laps, because there was no danger of overheating the tyres and pushing them beyond what they could do. Instead, it was about trying to get as much temperature in there as possible. And that allowed the drivers to push. And that's always a fun situation where drivers can push hard and have no consequences of losing out on tyre life later on as a result. So I think there were a few factors which kind of played towards it being an interesting race at what is a very cool track to look at. But whether we go back there, I don't know. It's always going to be down to money. And that's a question we'll have to ask going forward, I think.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.